And what about the different venues? I mean, there's the legendary Colosseum.
Mm-hmm.
What is the importance of this place?
Well, the Colosseum, its real name is the Flavian Amphitheater, is interesting because for a long time, Rome always had a chariot racing arena, the Circus Maximus, but it didn't have a permanent gladiatorial venue until relatively late, till about 80 AD, so during the reign of the Emperor Vespasian. And he built this thing. So he built the Flavian Amphitheater, who's from the Flavian family of emperors. And he did it as a deliberate act of propaganda. So before him had been Nero, who was sort of seen as a crazy or bad emperor. And one of Nero's indulgences is he had built this enormous palace for himself called the Golden House. So it was kind of this pleasure palace with 50 dining rooms and all this stuff. And it was basically wasting a ton of money on him, right? So right on the site where Nero had his golden house, Vespasian says, I'm going to erect a new building on top of it that's going to be for the pleasure of the people. So it was very much a political statement that my dynasty is going to be about serving Romans, not serving ourselves. And so that's why he builds the Flavian Amphitheater. And the funds he uses from it is basically from looting Jerusalem, because the other thing he had done just before this is he had sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple there, in fact, he and his son Titus. And so this is what he now builds in Rome as his gift to the people of Rome.
But it's interesting to think about that place, to think about their relationship with violence across centuries for spectacle, watching people fight. And like you said, only like 10% of the time it led to the death. But I read that still a lot of people died. A lot of gladiators were killed.
Oh, yeah.
There's numbers are just crazy. I mean, I read 400,000 dead. So this includes gladiators, slaves, convicts, prisoners, and so on. That's a lot of people.
The Flavian Amphitheater is really interesting too, just as a piece of technology and as influence on later world. I mean, almost every sporting arena today owes something to the Flavian Amphitheater, the Colosseum, in terms of construction. And it was amazingly sophisticated building. I mean, it had, retractable awnings and elevators and ramps that things could just pop up into the arena from below. And, it had very well designed passages where everybody could file in and file out very efficiently, and they were all numbered. So, I mean, it's one of, I think, the most influential buildings in history, just because of the way that, all these buildings we go to today, they're all kind of variants on it and using some of the ideas from it.
And the Romans took their construction seriously.
Oh, yeah, they were good at that. So they were excellent engineers. And the Romans were excellent engineers, especially when it came to what you might think of as humble stuff. I mean, today we tend to think of, a Roman building as shining white marble, right? Well, the core of that building was probably concrete, and the marble is just a superficial facade. And if you think about the Colosseum in Rome today, all the marble has been stripped off that building, and what you see is the concrete core, the structural core that's left. And the Romans, I mean, they didn't invent concrete, but they just used it more creatively than anyone had before. And if you look at buildings like the Greeks built, they're all rectilinear. They're all rectangles or squares, and they always have a lot of columns because you need to hold the roof up. The Romans, because of their use of concrete, could build wooden frames. They could have curves, they could have domes, they could have all kinds of stuff. And it just explodes the architectural possibilities. They also made a lot of use of the vault. So if you cut rocks and arrange them so they form a curve, you can have big vaulted spaces. And they were just brilliant with their mix of things. I mean, the Pantheon is the best preserved Roman building, and it's another brilliant building, incredibly influential. I mean, every Capitol building in the world or museum is an imitation of the Pantheon. The Capitol in Washington, D.C., the Capitol in Madison, where I'm from, Wisconsin, Austin, where we are now. They're all Pantheons. It's a big dome with a triangular pediment and some columns on the front. So it's just an amazingly influential building, but it's brilliant because the way it's constructed is, the concrete at the bottom of the dome is both thicker and has a denser formulation. So it's heavier where it needs to bear the weight. And then as you get further up the dome, it gets narrower and narrower, and they mix in different types of rock. So at the top, you're using pumice, that very light volcanic stone. So where you want it to be light, it's light. And it's here 2,000 years later. I mean, look around you. How many buildings that we're building now do you think are going to be here in 2,000 years? I suspect not many.
And it's not only that they lasted, but they were beautiful, or at least in our current conception of beauty.
Yeah. I mean, Vitruvius, his principles are things should be functional and they should be aesthetically pleasing. So that's a winning combination, I think.
Yeah, they pulled that off pretty well.